Well, you gave us the bad news about Michael Nesmith, and we had some bad news we wanted to address, not at the top of the program anymore, but before we go any further, Blackjack Lanza passed away this past week. At the age of, I saw 86 and 87, and obviously either is an advanced age, and it occurred to me that even Pat Patterson gets a lot of recognition for his contribution because he's acknowledged he was on the creative team and he was the creative guy behind the Royal Rumble. And, some of the other guys that have passed have gotten more response from the fans. In this case, Jack Lanza's response was more from people in the business. Did you notice that? Because it's been so long since he was a public figure for the fans. They don't realize how at one time what the size of a level of star he was, but also how respected he was, how over he was with the boys in the locker room, as an agent, what would now be called a producer in the WWF for so many years from the time that he retired and got off the road through. God, he was still up there when I moved back to Louisville in 1999, so he didn't retire until he was in his late 60s. And universally, every one of the boys liked and respected and looked up to and enjoyed being around at various points Jack Lanza. I can't remember anybody having a problem with Jack Lanza. He's just one of those guys. And still, he was an authority figure, and he didn't let the guys run over him, and they didn't even try because it's fucking Jack Lanza, right? But I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of the fans didn't go, oh my gosh, like it would have been for anybody else, but the guys, the boys in the business, up to and including Vince, which a lot of times when Vince tweets stuff, you think, well, maybe somebody wrote that for him or he approved it or whatever. But I can hear Vince saying the words about Jack Lanza that he said in that tweet. So I think it's something that resonated more inside the business just because of the time it's been since Jack had been in the ring. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think also because of what footage is out there and the careers they had, to fans who aren't from the AWA, it's funny, but Blackjack Mulligan became famous as the Blackjack.
Yeah.
To a lot of people. And Blackjack Lanza he had the one run with Mulligan as the tag team here, which went awry because Mulligan decided to leave. And he had a major run in the AWA. I mean, he's one of the all-time legends of the AWA. But outside of there...
St. Louis.
And St. Louis. I mean, he got to go with Heenan to St. Louis, which was...
Well, Heenan got to go with Lanza.
That's true.
See, a lot of people don't remember that. It wasn't like, oh, Bobby Heenan's managing this guy, so let's bring him too. It was like Jack Lanza is a top heel, and he says that he works better with this manager that he uses elsewhere, so let's bring Heenan in.
And he developed the Blackjack gimmick.
Yes. See, and with Mulligan, and of course, Blackjack Mulligan is Barry Windham's father, as we've mentioned, just for the younger listeners. And well, Blackjack Mulligan was the father of Barry Windham and his brother Kendall Windham. And then what is the relationship? Bray Wyatt is the grandson.
Yes.
And also Mike Rotunda became a son-in-law and married into the family. So that bloodline, there's been several third-generation Windhams involved in the business. But I first saw it, you skipped one place, because I first saw the Blackjacks. They were Bobby Heenan's team when I first started watching
Indianapolis
wrestling, yeah. And they were working for Bruiser. And to see those guys, because Jack was legitimately, and as he got older, he started stooping over a little bit, but he legitimately in his day was 6'4", 6'5", and 260, 265 or 70. And he was the small one because Mulligan, they used to bill him at anywhere 6'10", 350 or whatever, but he legitimately 6'7", 6'8". It looked like it, and every bit of 320, 325. And so they were fucking huge, and the black glove and the black hat, the black mustache. I mean, Gunsmoke was almost still on television. It still was. Gunsmoke wasn't canceled till 1975. Bonanza was still on TV. So cowboys were a big fucking deal. And it was a great, and you could believe that these two guys could beat up Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher, almost, kind of. No other regular humans could. But that's at that point, Jack Lanza had been a top heel in not only in Indiana, but as we mentioned, all over the Midwest and different places. And he worked with Heenan. And they had that run for 72 through 75 as the Blackjacks. And then Mulligan left because George Scott offered him a spot to be a top single star, because Mulligan was younger than Lanza and came along afterwards and had never really been a top single star. But in the Carolinas, that's where Blackjack Mulligan got over. And because of all the video and the film and everything that still exists, that's people think Blackjack Mulligan, right?
Does Mulligan get the call if Johnny Valentine isn't hurt in the plane crash?
Probably not. Not right at the end. He wouldn't have left unless it was the absolute top spot that George Scott was promising him in the Carolinas. He wouldn't have left being a WWF tag team champion to just, go work on the card or somewhere or whatever. It would have to be a spot like that.
It happened more often than not. I mean, Victor Rivera did it a few years later. Actually, not even that long later. A year later, Victor Rivera did it and he went to the IWA.
Well, it's two different, because Blackjack Mulligan wasn't going to leave the he had been in and around the business for a while. He was not going to quit while he was a WWF tag team champion to go, just somewhere and do something. Victor Rivera, besides the fact that he didn't have the upside or people calling for him in different territories that Mulligan did, probably also had something personal going on with the office and or fell for, this is the IWA and we're all the same new promotion thing that a lot of guys fall for. I'm just saying.
Still.
But anyway, nevertheless, but Lanza, that's the thing is that I guess he had runs in Georgia also as a single, and he and Heenan went down there some, because a lot of the AWA guys you mentioned, he was in the AWA for the bulk of the latter half of the 70s. Since they only ran 16, 18 days a month, because they didn't do a lot of spot shows, they did the big markets and it was spread out geographically. The guys that wanted to there could book themselves in other territories. That's why Bockwinkel started making so many shots in Houston, later on in Memphis, because he would make good money on nights that Vern wasn't even running shows. But I guess what would he have been? You mentioned the footage that's available also. They had some nice still pictures, but they did a tribute video to Jack, and there was like 2 or 3 clips of Blackjack's matches, because that was the era of the horrible looking potato-shaped job guys, the shitty TV matches, the rubber band ropes, and I would imagine
the glory days.
And now, to a lot of people's, eyes, that shit would, oh boy. But I guess it was probably after 81, 2, would Jack have transitioned out of the ring? Or was it maybe
it was a little bit after that, because
was it after that?
Remember, he was still there when Vern started to go to war with Vince, because it created, and to me it didn't work at that point in his life, the way he looked. He looked older, he was covered in hair, he had the mustache, and he became a babyface and he started wearing all white.
That's right.
Oh, it was not a good choice. And then he went to work for Vince.
And because Jack, and I loved him to death. He was he made the TVs a lot more fun, and the time after the production meeting before you had to do shit, because he loved to talk and tell stories. And he was just a fun guy anyway. And like I said, he'd be an authority figure in all business if he needed to be, but also, he had a million stories. But I'm thinking of him in the all white because he was one of the guys that had the spray-on hair, the spray can of spray-on hair for a bald spot on top, because his hair he had to be still to dying it at that point because he's in his mid-60s. 25 years ago when I'm dealing with him, and it's still just so black, lightning bugs are following him around in the daytime. But he had the can of spray on because it had gotten thin on the top and you could see the bald spot. But Jack was the lead agent. He was the head. Pat Patterson had a different responsibility, especially when he was on the creative team, and he would sit down with the main event guys on the pay-per-views and on the big shows, etc. That's where you hear Pat being the agent and helping the Harts and Michaelses and thing with their matches. But Jack Lanza was the lead agent that I said now is called a producer that was on the road every night. There was Tony Gurria and there was Dave Hebner and there was George the Animal Steele, and I'm leaving some people out, but Jack was always the top agent in the house shows, and he was obviously utilized high up on the pay-per-views as well, some of the matches. But he would not only, because a lot of times in those days on the house shows, they just send an agent for the locker room and an agent for the box office. So if Dave Hebner was checking up, Jack Lanza was the guy that you were dealing with, getting your finishes, getting a draw, any other issues, whatever. And then he's the one that would call in and do the agent report. They had a special number at Titan Tower that you would call, and it was hooked up to a recording machine with no time limit. Like if you leave a voicemail on a recording answering machine, is like after 3 minutes a beep, it's full, whatever. No, this was, you could leave however long a message you wanted, and that's what the agents did when they would call in after the shows and they do the agent report. And they would give the house and the reaction from the building if there was one, and any issues, and they would run down each match, and they would say enough about each match so that Vince and everybody in the office would know that they actually watched it. And every once in a while, if they couldn't or didn't watch it, they would say, I was held up in the back doing something else and I didn't see that, but blah, blah, blah. But Jack, some others were perfunctory, but Jack would he wouldn't come out and just bury anybody, but he would, every once in a while, he would place responsibility where it belonged, but he always had the uplifting, but it'll be another day tomorrow and they're looking better and the kids are learning, or some, platitude afterwards or whatever. And poor old Howard Finkel, that's one thing. He would get in at 5 o'clock in the morning because he's sitting there with his typewriter, fucking transcribing whatever agent it was. In this case, it'd be Jack, all these things. And it would be like 4 or 5 single spaced typewritten pages of the agent report from a town. And I wish I'd saved all of those. I probably have a few in the drawer here somewhere, but the amount of paper that we were inundated with was ridiculous. So for people who think I saved everything, but Jack was, he was a great guy. He'd seen everything and met everybody, had great stories, didn't get upset, didn't yell, but put his foot down if he had to, and did his job. And everybody came to him to ask, what should I do here? Or what do you think about this? Or blah, blah, blah. It wasn't like you hear somebody knocking George Steele and other people knocking Tony Gurria and whatever, but you didn't hear anybody burying Jack Lanza.
All right. This has been the uplifting story of Blackjack Lanza.
Well, I'm sorry.
Stay tuned next week for the Rene Goulet story here on the show.
Oh, God. And Rene Goulet. Rene Goulet. How could I forget to mention Rene Goulet? Or Sergeant Jacques Goulet, but I'm sorry, I'm paying tribute to somebody there. And here I look on my plate. What do you see? The cult of meat with extra cheese.
Now you're just completely going in a different place.
Do this again?